Welcome to the Global Discussion, a discussion with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name is Simon Hodgkins. It is a real pleasure to be joined today by Jaime Schwarz. Jaime, you're very welcome to the show. Before we get into the topics, let's begin by asking you to maybe introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do, a bit about your background for our worldwide audience. So over to you, Jaime. Pleasure to have you here.
And it's a pleasure to be here, Simon. Thank you so much for having me. Well, let's see. The story of Jaime Schwarz. This is going to be a little complex, but that's me. I was going to be a clinical psychologist like my dad before me, went off to become a psych and philosophy major, but then the siren song of advertising called. I thought, oh, a few lines, I can change millions of minds. Wonderful. Ha ha ha. And then, of course, after about a dozen years of doing that in New York City from, I don't know, about a dozen agencies and over 100 brands over that time period. Lots of awards. It was a great experience, Super Bowl spots and all that. I kind of realized that marketing was just increasing the hypocrisy that brands were providing to their consumers. Because marketing really is, let me tell the best story I can to convince somebody that they should buy my product, not how can I authentically share who I am and what I have to offer and build a relationship that way. That is a lot harder, but of course stays authentic over time. So what I found is the kind of little magic middle to not only work on market fit, but product market fit, which was a term I only came across once I discovered the lean startup methodology and startup world in general, was to make the brand itself the go-between of the company and the consumer. And thanks to the psychology background, I created brand therapy. Now, brand therapy is what I love to do with clients, sit down for long, deep discussions about purpose and meaning and mission. And what we end up with is a brand that can speak for itself. Now, this was 2017, 2018, pre-AI. So this was a psychological trick. The thing I usually tell clients is, when you run with scissors, you can hear your mom's voice. When you're running a business, you are running with scissors 24/7, which means you're thinking quite myopically and egocentrically. So how do you have a voice in the back of your head that says, you know what, this is what we should be doing right now. Step back for a second. Let's think about this. And building that voice was actually the best training we could get for what we would need to do fine tuning once Gen AI hit. So in 2022, brand therapy became a full company betterment platform by using AI to give you and any listener can do this right now. If they go to brandtherapy.coach, they can go to my GPT, tell it all about their brand, and the voice will become their brand. And they can have daily discussions with their brand. What should I be doing here? What do you think about this? My customer said this. How does that make you feel? And see from your brand's perspective, but also, of course, be the steward that trains that AI to keep it as authentic as possible. And it's a two-way relationship. And then, of course, as you build that AI out, we are now in the conversational media era. Whether brands know it or not, when they put an AI into the wild for a consumer to interact with, that's the brand talking. And that's a relationship between a consumer and a brand, whether the consumer consciously knows it, whether the company consciously knows it. So let's consciously take advantage of that and really fine tune that AI, stewarded by internal voices inside the company that really have that job to do that, to then have an authentic brand with 2 ears, 1 mouth, to listen to both sides and to speak to both with the same voice. And that's how you find not only product market fit, but how you find the ability in the company to product market shift. Because product market fit is a moment. Any startup, once they find product market fit, becomes another ossified company like any other. And they just don't look for product market fit anymore, not noticing it's shifting under their ground beneath them. So that company betterment platform started growing even further into Web3. In the background, while this was all happening, at the same time that I formed Brand Therapy, I filed the world's first NFT patent. It's called a system and method for identifying virtual goods. And the idea was just, what the hell does a smart logo do in the virtual space? We were in Pokemon Go days, and I said, how do we get interoperability? How do I own my stuff again? Centralized platforms have taken over. We need ownership. How do we get that? It sat vacant, well, not vacant, in stealth for 5 years. 2022, it was granted. What do you know? The same year that brand therapy goes AI. So Web3 is coming at me not only from the AI space, but from the XR space and the blockchain space. So I met a co-founder over a connector platform called Lunch Club, Chris Hewer, who was working on remotely. And I had already done 7 startups by this point. One of them was Send Thanks Now, gratitude tokens. We combined our companies into something called Gratitude and Glory to create tokenized intrinsic motivation for companies. But then as we kept talking, that's a product, not a goal, not a benefit, not a mission. What I, came up with, quote unquote, was team flow. How do we aim for team flow, not individual flow? And Chris found the founder of the team flow science, Dr. Jeff Van Hout in Holland. We brought his expertise for in-person team flow into the American shores because he's over in Holland, and we created the Team Flow Institute. So now company betterment is not only about a mindful company, but it's about a company that's able to adapt because you're changing the culture from oversight to support, from oversight to autonomy, from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation. Mutual commitment assured, personal goals aligned, high skills integrated, psychological safety, open communication, the things that you actually have to work on to get the most out of your team. Automate what you need to automate, but what you're augmenting, that's human-based. So we built a whole collective intelligence platform around that with AI. And we have an amazing assessment tool. In 90 minutes, we find out just how much hidden friction is between the team. But now, if you look at a crazy, crazy stat, the average age of a company in the last 50 years has gone from 61 years to under 18. Why? Change is happening faster and faster, and companies are worse and worse at it. Product market fit once again. And the other crazy stat, 70 to 80% of digital transformation that companies pay for is not fully implemented because the company rejects it. The company culture, the team, the people reject it. They are not so happy with change, and it's built into the system. But if you do brand therapy, you do team flow, you end up with an adaptable company that's able to change, able to take on things like digital transformation, which is why at the same time I also became the co-founder of Parallel Worlds as its chief strategy officer, which I positioned as the world's first spatial transformation company across AI, blockchain, XR, and quantum. So that's the company betterment platform of brand therapy, team flow, and spatial transformation. And that takes up a lot of my time. However, my wonderful IP agent, Devora Grazer from Kiss Patent, told me, oh, you want to go license this patent to like Nike and Apple and Adobe, who are infringing right now? But of course, the big boys doing what they're doing. Yeah, they're just going to eat you alive. You need product in market. You actually have to make something that is something that's applicable to your patent. So I've also been building Marked, MRKD, which is starting in the art space and then the music space and onward from there, authenticating digital objects, starting with art. And that's been the major passion point for the past few months in terms of getting that off the ground, because we're in go-to-market now. We've got a little bit of beta going, and the team's been building, and it's bootstrap land while all this is going on. Oh, yeah. And I start teaching again at City College next Monday, copywriting and marketing and PR. And I got two wonderful boys and a lovely wife who's a casting director. And we live in Hastings-on-Hudson, New York. There you go.
Incredible, Jamie. I feel like we've opened the treasure chest and all the jewels and gold and, trinkets are glistening. There is so much going on in your introduction. I'm going to go back a little bit if I can in a moment, but you said something, pre-AI was something that you said.
Yeah.
And it immediately hit me hard. Like there's the pre-AI world and the post-AI world.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very different. And some of the availability of technology now is enabling us to do things that we only dreamt of many years ago. But also, thanks for taking us through the brand therapy, a little bit about through the journey. We've been through Web3. We've talked about the various different businesses that you have going. I don't know where you find the time. Also, that product market fit, which, yes, you're right. I mean, it's talked about an awful lot, particularly in the startup and VC world, right? And that's such an important part. But I loved as well your discussion around team flow. That's such an important point, because you kind of came on to talking about how vital it is, and I'm sort of paraphrasing a little bit, but for companies to be able to adapt. And I think it's that adaptation, because the world's just moving at a blur. It's just a blur at this stage for some
It
companies
really is.
and
Yeah.
boards. The days of saying, here's our 10-year strategy, they're over. It's kind of like you don't know what's happening next week in some cases. So I love that sort of capability, that adaptability that you're bringing to businesses too. But having said all that, and I will come back to that, I want to just go back. I want to go back a little bit, because I wanted to talk about the teaching. I wanted to talk about the early days of copywriting. And then you kind of said it just real quick. I did some in advertising, and you went from Super Bowl to here in like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But you were a creative director, I know, at BBDO, creative director at Gyro. You sat on the board of Do Something. There's been a lot of really heavy hitting marketing. Was that the kind of work? Did you get into freelance writing because you found yourself navigating towards marketing? Did you always want to be a creative director? Just before we get into sort of today, where did all that come from originally, Jamie?
A very actually obtuse journey. I was not, funnily enough, a kid who grew up wanting to become a psychologist with a psychologist father, very mindful of himself, high IQ, all those things. I did not know the journey I was taking myself on. The closest thing to copywriting in my early adulthood, teenage years was poetry. I won a poetry contest early, I think 8th grade, and took many courses in college in it. And it just felt like this delivery method that had the strongest punch to it. Poetry was this thing that allowed me to get something that you could read on a page and it would punch you in the face in like, 3 sentences. It was the same thing that happened when I was studying Wittgenstein for my thesis in college, with the shortest book that changed the most of philosophy. It was all about that punch. And how could I create these pregnant things that were able to be these small delivery mechanisms that would explode into the world? And I didn't even realize that's what I was attracted to at that point. I thought, oh, to be a copywriter, you have to have an MBA. But I got to shadow through Colgate University, where I went to college, a couple of creatives and account people. I was actually at Saatchi & Saatchi the day that AOL and Time Warner merged. I remember sitting in a chair looking, oh, that's weird, that's happening. And they sent me on an interesting journey, first to SVA for summer school, then Chicago Portfolio School, which I graduated on 9/11, and then moved harpsichords and organs for a living before going to Miami Ad School. So I was a student. I was such a nerd when it came to every ad, every creative director. I literally would, when I would meet a creative director, I would lose words. Be like, because I wanted to talk about how they made that spot, or talk about the director that made that music video that then, did the Apple ad or whatever it was. And it was the obsessions. All this being said, the TLDR is at 45 years old, I'm 46 now, actually. So when I was late 44, I was finally diagnosed with ADHD. Ta-da! Turns out a wonderful environment for a person like me is to work on 7 clients at the same time in a creative environment in an agency, where not only are you able to bounce off ideas, but you're also able to let your art director structure you, the strategist keep you in line, the account people take care of the account, the boss tell you, whoa, hey, this is how we make this good creative instead of all over the place. And so I had a wonderful nest to grow up in with undiagnosed ADHD, to be all over the place, to really enjoy those 100 different brands and dozens of different industries, and to percolate in that space until I went, whoa, marketing's not working, and kept going from there.
Thank you for sharing that, Jamie. I appreciate that. And when you get to that, oh, marketing's not working, there's a better way here. Although you're still extremely creative in everything that you're doing, right? It takes creativity and passion. But there's also now the entrepreneurial side of things, right? Whether it's bootstrapping the latest thing you've set up, or working on brand therapy and working with clients. Where does that entrepreneurial piece come from? Because that's a whole other platform, isn't it? Being entrepreneurial, running your own show, finding partners, growing a business.
I think there's 2 kinds of entrepreneurs in this world, and oh my God, is this a subjective statement? But There's the ones that theoretically love startups and entrepreneurship and the structure of building that kind of stuff. And then there are founders, the people who are like, I can't not do this. I'm fine. I will deal with the pain of entrepreneurship so I can make this happen. Fine. I will deal with the pain of having to bootstrap and do everything on my own because I can't be told what to do. I don't like this brief. I want to give this brief. I want to make this in the world. And it's that intransigence that forces you into creating a startup. I think the best founders are the ones who said, damn it, everything else I want to do, but I have to do this. And it's that have to that makes you the great entrepreneur, not the nerd of the entrepreneurial structures and everything that I learned along the way that some people have written some amazing books about, teach at Y Combinator and Techstars and everything. But there's a difference between that kind of entrepreneur and the founder. You don't have to be a founder to be that kind of person, but you have to do that thing. You have to.
Yeah, no, I get it. That makes a lot of sense. So let's jump back into then, if I can, Jamie. And thanks for sharing that, because I just wanted to give the audience a bit of context to the makeup and the journey. It's really
Sure.
important. But let's talk about brand therapy, because you said something at the top that really intrigues me. I'd like you to unpack it for me, which is this principle or this statement that you made that because of AI or due to AI,
Mhm.
brands now sort of speak for themselves. That is your brand now. And I don't think that's landed with a lot of people. Because
Mm-mm.
even when you said it to me, and I kind of in the marketing world, I kind of went, yeah, that's really important. So when you start to unpack that and say, do you know what? Not only is the AI actually representing you out in the marketplace or worse to that effect, but that they need the therapy too. They need the brand therapy treatment too. Could you take us
Mhm.
through that and why that's critical?
Sure. Best way to do that is to work on an example, which would be a personal brand. So this would be somebody who is out there as an influencer or has, their names on the bottle, whatever that is. Um, Very typically where we begin is with them, why they're doing what they're doing. Questions like you're asking me, who the hell are you? It's really about saying, let's take Simon Sinek's golden circle of the what, the how, the why, and put a who in the middle. And that who is not you. That's the brand, but it's your baby. So we need to get all the DNA that we can into that baby before we cut the umbilical cord. Because once we cut that umbilical cord, it's not yours anymore. It's the market's to shape, to nurture. And that means you have to let that go. So we spend however long it takes. It can be one session, it can be months getting to the truth of what you're really trying to do here. The funny thing that happens, I should say, the most repeatable offense is that founders they have a mission, but they keep on not understanding how to make money off of that good they want to do in the world. So they come up with some other mechanism and then say, with the profits from that, we'll put some money towards this as kind of a nonprofit. And there's a big shift that happens when we finally get them to the point where the business can be built around the mission, that doing good is possible by doing good business. And once that's in place, things move a lot faster. But it takes a while to get there because we have to really be authentic to who they are.
And I think what's also really powerful in the work that you're doing is this realization that the brand all of a sudden can listen for itself
Yeah.
and can speak for itself. And I'm not sure. Well, we've never had that situation, right? Because it's always been a room full of, I'm going to inverted commas, suits figuring out what the brand represents. So when the brand all of a sudden can start listening, thinking to some degree in inverted commas, and responding for itself, that's a whole new world of marketing, isn't it?
It is, but we want to be very careful about
Mm.
how close we anthropomorphize to the point of saying things like thinking.
Yeah.
We still have to make sure that we know what's actually happening with a transformer model, which is just quick predicting. Like I love that Wallace and Gromit GIF where he's just laying down the tracks as fast as possible on the train, and that's how GPT works.
Yeah.
It's not thinking; it's a
Yeah.
collective of past.
It's pausing to make us feel like it's thinking a lot harder than it is,
Yeah,
maybe. But
that's been going on in computers since 20
yeah,
years ago. They realized to add the spinning beach ball or whatever, they made it take longer than a computer actually did because people thought in their heads, wait a second, that's too fast. You didn't do the work.
right.
So computers have to slow down for us. And that's part of what's going on here because you get two like speakers together. What happens? They invent a language that's way more efficient than we could ever understand. They're slowing down for us to translate into tokens in English so that we can interface with them, which is still an amazing thing. I'm just saying, let's know what it is. But within that space, I'll give you an example that really shows that we're in this world right now. We may all be catching up because we're Gen X or millennials even. But Character AI, which was purchased by Google this past year, exploded out of the scene. Why? Because we've got all these people all by themselves. They socially just live in the computer now. And all of a sudden, there's a perfect person there talking to them, actively listening. Everything that they want to know is right there in front of them.
Hmm.
And so everybody had a character to talk with and to form a relationship with. And now we're having all of these weird relationship conversations, people falling in love with AI. What's that really mean? Can you have a relationship? And we really have to make sure that we educate people the same way that we did with social media about what this really is before our lesser demons get their teeth into this the same way that they did with social media. And it's reminding me one extra thing. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm stripping in front of the camera right now. I'm showing my t-shirt to Simon. That's where I'm coming from. Classically trained with the little aliens on it. That's my perspective. We've got to get back to those are ones and zeros, and they're never not.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great point. It's funny because on one hand, if anybody's seen the movie Her, we're kind of living
Mhm.
in that world right now.
Yeah,
But it comes with a health warning. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I don't want to run out of time, but I do want to ask you about the future. And I want to ask you about obviously, you've got a lot going on at the moment, James, but when you look forward and you think about the year ahead or the next 6, 12, 18 months, what's on your roadmap? What's on your horizon? What are you working towards? What are you hoping to achieve?
Well, a lot of what I've said is still extremely revolutionary for anybody to hear. So getting the word out about brand therapy is always a 24/7 challenge. More so from the threat side. Not so much my solution. I totally get that, like I think I have the best solution. I just want to be a better, not so much a Cassandra, but a proper Warner that's out there saying, hey, this is what we're dealing with today. And there's a lot of opportunity if we do it in the right way. I'm also an advisor for xrsi.org, X Reality Safety Intelligence. We're really trying to make sure that we cover all of these kinds of incidentals now as best we can and just be as mindful as we move forward as possible. There's huge, huge power, huge responsibility, and we are not picking up the responsibility tab in any way, shape, or form. So that's one. Two, Marked has really taken on a life of its own recently. We are starting to work with some amazing galleries around the world for Marked art. And Public Enemy's frontman Keith Shockley is now the frontman for Marked DJ. So we're excited about where that's going to go. Some things I probably shouldn't be saying out loud yet because they're still in the works. But as Marked kind of gets out into the world and we really show how we can have a proper relationship, a really simple UX relationship with Web3 and how it's all about augmenting us rather than automating and separating stuff off on its own, I think the better off we'll be. So I'm really sticking to the foundational, infrastructural, philosophical side of this stuff to make sure that people see the 10,000-foot view because we're way too quick to get down to that microscopic place. And that's one of the things I'm really happy about with some of my clients, like my one client in England, Glass Aftercare, which is a facade management service company. We've developed FIMS, facade information management systems, so that they can digitally transform their clients so facades become digital twins. He's got a whole education platform he's got to do. And it's that same thing. It just repeats. So that structure is that I'm doing of saying, hey, Here's how you create the infrastructure that allows for proper building, for standing on top of the right shoulders and being able to build and build and build in the right way. That echoes every time in any single piece of work I may be working on.
Love that, Jamie. Um, Last couple of things I want to ask you. I'm going to ask you in a minute to give us a parting thought or some last minute thoughts as we wrap up. But before I do that, I think it's important with everything that we've been touching on. If people want to reach out and connect with you or find out more about Team Flow Institute, find out more about Parallel Worlds, find out more about Marked, find out more, of course, about brand therapy. Do you want to maybe tell people where to find those, or where's the best place to send people to before we get into your parting thoughts, Jamie?
Sure. Well, the scatter spray of the websites are brandtherapy.coach, teamflow.institute, parallelworlds.us, marked.art, mrkd.art. But all that's at my LinkedIn, and you can just search for Jaime Schwarz, Schwarz. So Jamie spelled like Jem and Schwarz without a T. Lovely bearded face will be staring at you.
That's a great. Thanks for sharing those web addresses, because I know people will want to check those out based on our conversation today. Okay, so finally, is there anything that you want to leave us with? Any sort of last minute thoughts, or any maybe something we haven't touched on, but whatever you want to wrap us up with, Jamie, over to you.
Well, once again, thank you so much for having me, Simon. It's a real pleasure to be here. And thank you for the freedom to just spew whatever I want right now, because I also want to get off on my chest something much larger, which is how we get out of late stage capitalism and into something new. And that's where all of my platforms are heading towards. And that's early stage co-creationism, or the technical term being prosumerism, instead of being a consumer or a producer consumer. I want to help people move from being conspicuous consumers that define themselves by the objects that live around them, that they have, to the legacy they leave behind in the objects that live beyond them. That's going to take a lot of technology, but it's going to take a lot more ethics.
Yeah, love that, Jamie. Thanks so much indeed for sharing that, and almost that North Star that we're working towards. So that brings us nicely to the end of our discussion today here on the Global Discussion. I want to thank everybody who's been watching or listening to this episode around the world. Make sure that you like, follow, subscribe to everything I need you to do to help support this show. But go and check out everything that Jaime Schwarz is doing. It's incredible. I highly recommend it. And hopefully you'll join me back here for some more conversations with creatives, leaders, and thinkers just like Jamie. Jamie, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you today.
Real pleasure back at you. Thank you so much.